Hello everyone, and welcome to the 39th Cocoa programming tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to be covering how we can work with the screensaver view in Cocoa. So technically, the screensaver view is actually part of the screensaver framework. So although it's not directly a Cocoa API, we're still going to use it in this tutorial just because I didn't really want to make a separate tutorial just for a screensaver tutorial. So it kind of goes along with a lot of the drawing stuff we've already done in previous tutorials, because what we're going to be doing in this tutorial is making a very simple screensaver example, nothing too complicated, but it would be very fun to actually do a separate series on some more advanced things that we can do in screensavers. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how you can make a basic screensaver that you can show your friends and say, hey, look at this, I made a screensaver. Alright, so what are we going to be doing here? Well, first off, we don't want to make a new Cocoa application. We want to go into the System Plugins section, and we want to make a new screensaver. So go ahead and hit Next on that. And I'm just going to call mine Lesson39, but feel free to call yours something else, and probably make more sense actually in the project if you call it something else. But anyway, here you go. We have our Lesson39 header file and implementation. And basically, as you can see, this is just a view, which is a subclass of the screensaver view. And the screensaver view class basically gives you a lot of options for animating in a screensaver. So if we flip over to the implementation section, you can see that we have a lot of different things relating to the screensaver itself, or the animations itself, I should say. So obviously we have the init with frame method, which is a special isPreview option, which I believe is determining whether this is actually displaying in the little preview window that's inside the system preferences section. In system preferences, you know what I'm saying. When you look at the little preview window of your screensaver, I believe that's what the bool would pass in yes if it is or not. But that's not really, doesn't really matter for us for this tutorial anyway. But as you can see anyway, it's setting an animation time interval of 1/30th of a second, which indicates that the animation will fire every 1/30th of a second. So what happens is every 1/30th of a second, we're going to get this method right here called animate one frame to be called. And if we want our drawRect to be called, we can tell animate one frame to set needs display, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to say set needs display yes, and technically you can do this without even using drawRect. You can actually make it in the animate one frame method, which usually isn't recommended in normal NSView subclassing, but it is actually something the documentation says you can do, or is permissible in the screensaver view classes. So with that, that's all we really need to do. Animate one frame will be called every 1/30th of a second. It'll call drawRect. Some of these other methods, start and stop animation, are pretty obvious. They are just called whenever the animation is started and stopped, which is usually when you start or stop the screensaver. And has configure sheet, you return yes if you want to have a configure sheet. And a configure sheet, basically you can pass a sheet back and it will allow the system preferences section of the screensavers to actually give you customizable options for your screensaver. So maybe if you wanted to have, for this tutorial we're doing a rectangle that bounces all around the screen diagonally. And so you could maybe give an option to change the color of your rectangle or something like that. And you can actually make a sheet that the system preferences can use and will allow your application to save different pieces of information. But of course, for that, we have to learn something else, which are known as NSUser defaults, and I haven't covered that at all. So I'm going to save that kind of stuff for a separate tutorial. But for this tutorial, we're really just going to get down how we can animate in a screensaver view. And all we're going to be doing in this tutorial is basically making a rectangle that bounces back and forth. And we're going to have a rectangle that actually trails it, just to kind of add a little neat effect. Alright, so the first step here is to actually make two different instance variables, both of which are going to be just used. One will be an NSRect to just draw the rectangle, or the actual rectangle frame, so give it the points. And the next is going to be an NS point representing the movement. So the point in the x direction, so the point's x direction will, I should just say the point's x value will represent the movement in the x direction of our frame or our rectangle, and the y will just represent how far it moves in the y direction. So we'll have an NS rect called rectangle, or we'll just call it rect, and we'll just make an NS point, and we'll call that rect movement. Alright, so now that we have those two things, the NS rect again just represents our rectangle, and the point represents how far it's going to move. So we can just say underscore rect. We're going to make NS make rect, and we'll just set the origin for the beginning to be 0, 0. And the width, let's just say it's going to be the maybe the width and the height of the frame divided by 10. So we'll just take the entire frame of the screensaver itself, which is your entire screen size, and we'll just say frame.size.width, and we'll divide that by 10. And we'll say frame.size.height, and we'll divide that by 10 as well. Alright, so now that we have that, we have our rect movement, and we're going to say that this is going to be an NS make point, and we're going to set this to be 10, and the next value is going to be 10. Alright, so basically all the movement means is it's going to move 10 pixels to the right and up when it starts out, and that's of course what we want since it's starting at the bottom left corner when it's an origin of 0, 0. Alright, so now that we have that, basically we just get on to our drawing code now. So in our draw rect, what we're going to do is implement just the colors first that we're going to draw. So we'll say we're going to draw a white color rectangle that's going to trail behind the one that we move. So to do this, we can just say NSColor white color, and we'll set that color, and then we'll just draw where our rectangle is. So NSRect fill, and we'll fill our rect. And sorry, that's underscore rect. So as you can see, our drawRect method passes in a rect object, which is the frame size of the entire screensaver. And we're going to use the underscore rect to represent, of course, our rectangle that we're moving. So that's why we used the underscore to differentiate between the two. Alright, so now that we have that, this rect will represent that little small white rectangle that's going to trail behind the blue one we're going to make in a second. So what we're going to do is draw this white one, and then when that's done, we're going to just draw the next rectangle, which is going to be the white one. So we're going to draw the blue rectangle that's going to be in front of it. So we're going to move the rect after we draw the white one, and then we're going to redraw it, make it blue after, of course, we've moved it. Alright, so now we just have to figure out the collision detection, or the bounds of where this rectangle is going to bounce. So of course, if we just left it moving 10 by 10 up and to the right, of course this rectangle would just go right off screen, and that's not very cool. We want it to bounce. So how can we do this? Well, we're basically just going to set up a bunch of if statements, or a bunch of conditions here, so that it doesn't go off screen. So let's start with the x direction of our rectangle. So we'll say as long as the rectangle's origin of the x value is as soon as it's greater than the right side of our screen. So as soon as it hits the right, further off than the right side of our screen, we want to bounce back. So we can say, well, we'll just say rect, which represents the entire, that's the rectangle that's passed in, which is the entire frame of our screensaver. So say as long as we're greater than, or as soon as we are greater than the rects, or the entire frame size dot width, then we want to bounce back. Now there's a little caveat here with this implementation, of course, is that the origin of our rectangle is on the far left side, but we really want the right side of our rectangle to bounce off the wall, just so it makes it look nice. So we don't really want the origin to be bouncing off the right side. We want the right side of our rectangle to bounce off. So how can we make this happen? Well, all we really have to do is subtract how far or how large our rectangle width is, and that will just make sure that, well, as soon as it hits that far to the right, we'll just subtract the width of our rectangle, and that would represent where the origin should change direction. So we can just say underscore rect dot size dot width. And that'll just mean that as soon as our rectangle's size, or sorry, its width hits the right side of the screen, then it will bounce back. So how can we do that? Well, we want to, of course, just change the rect's movement. So we can just say rect movement dot x gets negative rect movement dot x. All right. So the next step, of course, is if we hit the left side of the screen. So if our rect.origin.x ever goes less than the rect of that's our entire screen rectangle, .origin.x, then we want to bounce back. So we'll say, again, rect movement.x gets negative rect movement.x. And there we go. So now, of course, the next step is to implement the y direction stuff. So to do this, we'll actually just copy and paste our x direction stuff since it's pretty much the same. So we'll copy and paste that. And as long as this will make sure is the as soon as the y coordinate hits the top of our screen, we want it to bounce back down. So the rect origin, the y value, as soon as it's greater than the entire screensaver's height, and it's less than, of course, we want to subtract our screensaver's height as well, or sorry, our rectangle that's bouncing height as well, because again, the origin y value is in the bottom left of our rectangle. So of course, we want to make sure that we make sure that our height of our rectangle is going to be the thing that's bouncing off the top edge of our rectangle, because we don't want it just to go past the origin and bounce back. We want it to be bouncing off the top of our rectangle, since that's going to hit on the top of the screen. All right, so once that happens, we want to change our y direction, so it goes in the opposite direction here. And the same goes for if we hit the bottom of the screen. As soon as the rect origin of the y direction is less than our screen's y coordinate, then of course we want to bounce back the other way. So we'll say we'll flop our y directions there as well. All right, so now that we have that, all we have to do is basically apply these different movements to our rectangle, and then we have to redraw it. So we'll just say rect.origin.x plus equals our rect movement.origin.x. And of course we have to do the same for our origin, the y value. So plus equals our rect movement.y, like so. All right, so now we just have to change the color and draw it. So n is color, blue color, we'll set that. And then we'll just have to set the value of our, or actually draw in our rectangle. So we'll say nsRectFill underscore rect. And that should be all the drawing code that's necessary to get this to work. So you can go ahead and build this, or you can go ahead and hit the run option right there. It doesn't really matter. Either way, as long as the project's actually built, then we should be able to use it. So as you can see, it obviously didn't just start running. Xcode doesn't run your screensavers. You have to actually install them and run them out of the system preferences, which is probably where you want to test it anyway, since that's where you would test it if you were to run it on any computer. So we can go to Show in Finder right here under Products. We can right click on our L39, Show in Finder, double click on the screensaver, install for this user only, and as you can see, we get our little preview window here of what's going to happen. And if we test this out, you can see that the little frames go back and forth here, bounce off the edges of the screen, and as you can see, that white rectangle is trailing behind the rectangle, because again, what we're doing is we're just drawing the white rectangle first, which is like the original rectangle. Then we move the rectangle, and then we redraw it in blue. And again, that's the collision detection working there, making sure that we don't go out of bounds. And as you can see, it only hits the edges of the rectangle, not to go any further. So anyway, to get out of this, you just move your mouse or hit escape or whatever, and that will get you out of the screensaver. So anyway, that's pretty much all there really is to know about, getting basic stuff done for your screensaver. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave your questions in the comments below. I might actually do more tutorials on screensavers as well, considering there's a lot more you can do with OpenGL, which I have a little bit of knowledge in anyway. And there's a lot more you can do with NSUser defaults to actually save your values so that you can actually save information like what color you want to use as a rectangle. So once we learn how to use NSUser defaults, maybe we'll come back and make some more stuff with the screensaver view. But anyway, as it stands, this is what the tutorial was on. And if you have any other questions, again, leave them in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next tutorial.